First, I'm going to show you what to do if your horse actually trips. So each horse is a little bit different. You kind of have to know what your horse is. And Shane is pretty agile, so he doesn't really trip. But there's a lot of trippy gaited horses out there because they can't either feel their feet, they don't know what to do with their feet, or they're just clumsy or lazy. Okay? So if you have a pretty agile horse, of course you can ride it on a looser rein. And if it trips, it will usually jump up and catch itself. But when you're on a lazy horse or one that doesn't know what to do with its feet or something that's just very clumsy, even though it's been ridden on all different terrains, you need to help it. And most people do the wrong thing when the horse trips. So when you ride a trippy horse, if it's really trippy, you do not want to ride it on a loose rein like this. Because if you do, it's going to get its head down. They normally carry 60% on the front, 40% on the back. They're going to get their head down, and they're going to carry like 80-90% on their front end. They might even put their head to the ground. So if they trip, all their weight's on the front end, so it's really easy for them to fall down. So now when you have a trippy horse, you have to think, I don't want them to fall down, so what do I do? So you want to have your rein shorter. So if they do trip, you can do something to help them. You also want to do this so you can warn them of things coming up, and you see a tree root, a step down or something like that, and you just give a little squeeze and relax, which is a half halt that tells the horse, hey, wake up, there's something coming up. If they're really lazy, I will carry a stick, and I'll give them a little tap right before the thing to say, hey, pay attention. But you can use a word, whatever you want, but you want to make sure it's something that the horse pays attention. And again, if it's very lazy, you should have a stick or spurs to keep that horse paying attention to you, because you don't want it to fall down. So if you have an agile horse, it will usually catch itself, and you just need to get your weight back so you don't knock it off its feet. But if it is a trippy horse, a horse that's heavy on his front end, doesn't know how to carry itself, doesn't know what to do with its feet, when it trips, everything's going to go flying forward. What you want to do to help that horse get back up and not fall off is to get all your weight back. Because if it's all forward, the horse is trying to catch itself. Well, the horse trips, it tries to catch itself, but as it's catching itself, if you lose your balance and lean forward, you put more weight on that front end, and it's very difficult for that horse then to push himself up and you back and get back on its feet. Okay? So to help those horses that are not so good with that, you want to ride very balanced, make sure you're paying attention. Keeps the rein short enough, half halt before the objects come up. If they do trip, shove your feet out in front of you as far as you can. Push on your stirrup so you can push your weight back. Lean back as far as you can, okay? Now you might be like, what? That's crazy. Yeah, you want to get all the weight on the back end. So you lean back as far as you can. Now, if you could get your head all the way back here and that horse is really tripping, that's what I would do. But it's hard with some of these cantles if they're high. So lean back as far as you can and pull up on the rein to get that horse's head up. And brace yourself. Push on those stirrups, lean back, and hold that rein. What that does is it gets everything on that horse's hind end to help him, so then he can try to lift his front end up. By pulling on the reins, what it helps the horse to do is it can push on that bit, and since you're pulling it back, once he pushes on the bit, he has something to push himself against, and he can push himself back up. That doesn't work with all the horses, but helps with a lot of horses because I've ridden a lot of trippy gaited horses. So remember, you're riding down the trail, you half halt, you're trying to help him do things, and you're like, oh, he's tripping and he's falling down. Lean back, pull up, hold and brace, let him push himself back up. Don't come back up until you're sure that horse is all the way up. Now, sometimes it happens so quick, you can't do anything because you don't expect it. So if you have a trippy horse, you want to practice this maneuver at least 10 times each time before you go out riding. Just go 1. It's good for sit-ups too. 2, 3, and so on. Practice that because you're trying to get muscle memory. So the day the horse does trip, you will naturally just go like this and pull them up. Now, a lot of people with other trotty horses and quarter horses will say, why are you doing that? Gaited horses are different than quarter horses, and they can do so many things with their legs, so sometimes when the horse is tripping, it can't figure out what to do with its legs. If the horse is pacey, both the legs are going forward, and when they trip, they got to swing the opposite legs forward to catch themselves, which is difficult for them to do. So you need to help these horses more than the regular horses if they are trippy. Okay, some aren't trippy at all. He doesn't trip at all. I can ride him down the trail like this. I'm perfectly fine. If he did trip, I could just sit back and he would pop himself up. But not all the gaited horses are like that. So you do need to know what to do and to practice it, because I see many horses trip that would normally not have fallen down, but the people did the wrong thing. The horse tripped, they fell forward, they dropped the reins, all the way it got on the horse's front end, falls on his knee, the person loses their balance, they fall off the side. Okay? Also know that if you're a big person, or you're a little too big for that horse, you can make that horse trippier. So it's not that they can't carry you, but you need to balance yourself, especially if you're top heavy up here. Anywhere up in here, if you're top heavy, a big chest or a big belly, you got to get all that weight back, because that's a lot of weight throwing that horse forward. Kind of think of it, if you were giving someone a piggyback ride and someone came up behind you and jumped on top of both of you, it would knock you off your feet and you'd probably go falling forward. That's what we do. By accident, the horse trips, we fall forward and we knock them off their feet, and they fall forward and then sideways on top of us, or forward and flip over. So remember, push your feet forward as much as you can, push on those stirrups to push yourself back, lean back, and as much as you can, pull up on that rein and hold it so that horse can push off that bit, or the bitless bridle, whatever you have. He can use that to push himself back up. Okay? All right. So now we're going to walk and go over the obstacles. So when you're going over the obstacles, again, you want to make sure the horse can do it on the ground really well first before you ride them over it, because you don't want to get hurt if you don't have to. And when you start it, don't start with the big obstacle you put up. Again, start with the little poles on the ground. Make sure they can do that well, which he does fine. And then you can start raising them up. And you want to make sure the horse can do this at the walk first. As you get into the obstacle, especially if you make a cross rail or a pole, you're trying to get to the middle of the pole. This is a good way to teach your horse to go over logs as well. Keep your hands wide. As you get into the object, don't look down. You look up, and then let the horse do what he needs to do. Okay? Now we're going to the pole. You can look at the pole. Now look up. Just look where you're going. Because if you look down, it puts more weight on their front end. Now we're going to this one. The poles are a little spread apart, so I got to be careful. So sit back, hold them in the middle, let him take his time. Okay? If he stops, that's okay. Let him stop if he needs to. Don't force them to go faster over it, because you can make them trip. Okay? So let's do it again, and then we'll do it the other way. Now, if you have a pacey horse, this is good to also do, when you're lunging them to help break up that pace. The pacey horses tend to drag their feet more. They're a little bit different balanced, and so they can trip more than the other horses. So stay in the middle, hand wide, and you want to make sure you're looking up. Now, I use the hands wide, so I pull out to the side instead of back, so I don't interfere with him going over the poles. And they need to use their head, neck, and back. So hands wide, let him take his time. Now you'll see I'm not standing up in the stirrups or anything to get off of his back, because I'm practicing this like this is a log out on the trail. And we just want to make sure that he is able to pick his feet up and we're not jumping that obstacle. So now we're going to go the other way. So again, don't start with the highest jump, which is right there. I'm going to start with the pole. Keep your hands wide. Stare at the pole. Now stare in front of you. Keep your body back. Yeah. So that way if they trip, you're not falling forward. Hands wide, stare straight ahead. You can still steer. You use your peripheral vision. So you can still see the jump below you, but you're looking straight ahead. You never want to look down at the object. Your head will fall forward, and that puts 10 more pounds of weight on that horse's front end. So get right to the middle of the cross rail so your horse doesn't hang a leg and trip, and then stay very still. Let him do the work. Now, I just totally take my leg off, and he goes through it slow, and that's fine. So this next time, I'll keep a little bit more leg as we're going through it to see if he'll keep walking over it. Okay, but look up, keep your hands wide. Now, you can do this with a longer rein if your horse is agile, but if they're not, I wouldn't, because if you're like this and they trip, their head's already very close to the ground, and you can't reach down, grab those reins and pull that horse back up. So steer straight. Now I'm going to use a little leg. So that time he knew to keep going over it. Okay? So you can use anything. You can use tires, but make sure they're big enough for the horse to get his feet through and not get stuck. You can come up with any different things that you see on trail or any things you find around the barn that you can have your horse step over, step on, go up or down, but just make sure it's safe and it's not going to get caught on anything. Okay? You can go over tarps. They won't teach your horse to pick his feet up higher. It just teaches him to go over something different. But be careful. If your horse has shoes on, the tarps can get caught on the shoes, and then your horse can drag the tarp and spook himself, and you could fall off that way. So you want to be very careful with those things. But use things that are safe, not metal. Wood is good. Use poles. You can go around buckets. You can go around cones. And then try riding. Once the horse can do that well, try riding around the barn. Go up and down the hills. Go where the footing is uneven. And teach them how to get through those things. Because the horses that don't have good proprioception don't know what to do with their feet. And it will take a while before they figure it out. It's not like you do this 1 week and the horse is cured. No, this is months and months and years and years. Each horse has its own athletic ability. The ones with higher athletic ability won't be trippy, but they might fucking do some crazy stuff if they get spooked. But they usually won't be trippy horses. The horses that are lazy, the horses that are very calm, the horses that have a high pain threshold, those can tend to be a little bit more trippy. Because the ones that are calm, they don't care so much. The ones that are lazy, they don't care at all. And the ones that have a high pain tolerance, when they hit things, it doesn't hurt them, so they don't care about picking their feet up higher. So you have to know those things about your horse. And then know when they're pacey, they swing both legs on one side. So if you swing both legs on this side, and then you trip, what do you think the horse has to do? His genetics tell him, I have to get both those legs on the other side up there, which is very hard. Because they're kind of connecting the legs on the side. It's not like they just got to bring the right front. To them, they got to bring the right front and the right hind. And that takes some coordination. So if the horse is pacey and it's a trippy horse, I teach those horses to trot. I use a lot of poles. I trot them over the poles. I will jump them over the poles. And I am constantly teaching them what to do with their feet so they become better at it. And every horse can get better, even if it's lazy, even if it's pacey or very calm. They can all get better, but they will only get better if you put the time in. You can be successful, but you have to work at it. If you have a trippy horse and you don't want to evaluate it, you don't want to work on it, then just sell that horse because you don't want that horse to fall on you and you don't want that horse to get a bad reputation just because you were unwilling to work with it. I work with many horses that people, were throwing away, they're laying them up in pasture because they said, the horses were neurologic or something was wrong with them. And I can tell you most of those horses that I then worked with, they just didn't know how to go up and down hills and handle the footing. And once I taught them, then they were fine. Some of them, are the big lanky walking horses because they reach so far out with their legs. And what they had to learn to do was shorten up their stride. Shorten the stride up to go down the hill and to go over objects because they can clear so much at one time. And that's harder for a horse to pick his foot up and clear 5 roots versus I'm on Shane and he has a shorter stride and he just has to clear 2 roots at a time. So know what your horse's stride is and how to help them. But half halting, keeping them paying attention, giving them little jobs to do so they stay awake will really help with the trippy horses that are doing it because they're lazy or they don't know what to do with their feet. They have to learn, they have to practice, and then they will get much better at it. All right, hope that helps all of you that have trippy horses and we're trying to figure out what to do with them.